name is Angelos, and I work at Posti as the design system and operations lead. I joined there in March during the pandemic, so it has been rather challenging to onboard, but what can you do? However, how fast an old company like that changes sometimes scares me. So this talk revolves around the story of transforming this almost 400-year-old company with modern design methods. Before we start, I would like to begin with a short story that is pretty relevant to this talk, but also to every person who is working in-house. In a 1968 paper, a computer scientist, namely Melvin Conway, wrote the following: any organization that designs a system will inevitably produce a design whose structure is a copy of the organization's communication structure. What this observation meant in layman's terms was simply that dysfunctional organizations tend to create dysfunctional applications. Harvard Business Review rejected Conway's article that contained this famous quote that we now know as Conway's Law, because he was lacking proof. And I really find that very ironic, don't you? Anyway, let's zoom into Posti now and talk a little bit about that. Posti is the Finnish Postal Service delivering mail and parcel in Finland. The company was founded on September 6th in 1638. So when we talk about Posti, we talk about 400 years of emotions. Whether it is a love letter or your annual taxation, we deal with all those emotions. So here's a personal story. My daughter was born last year, and after 3 months, she received her first letter from Posti. It had a card and her social security number. So although Posti has been a household name to every person living in Finland for as long as they're alive, well, for us also times are changing. The traditional business of mail is shrinking quite rapidly, and consumers, they become more proactive and aware of the climate emergency we're all facing globally. So even our invoices and letters become digital. Customers, they're adopting faster than before e-commerce habits, especially during now to the pandemic, and they're expecting different things from us all the time. So in order to stay relevant, we had to harness the strengths that we have as a company and do radical changes on top of that. Those changes would not take place if we did not change also radically our ways of working. For us, that meant that design gets the spotlight. It is an equal partner with business and technology when it comes to how we operate. After all, effective change is holistic, but it also has to start from somewhere. When design is reduced to simply the deliverable, as opposed to design being an ongoing process, it is seen as merely execution. It is a function of a tech team. So then it is hard to justify the value of design because it is not shown directly through UI. In mature customer-centric companies, designers and developers, they co-create the ways of working. Design works on a strategic level with facilitation, service design, research, and coaching. However, still, unless design is seen holistically, a compartmentalized design jumbled into silos is hard to measure. At Posti, design is infused in our operations, and it is critical business strength. So we had to be bold with our questions. Solving wicked problems require passionate people who get things done, and they have the autonomy to do so. One of the first big questions that we asked ourselves was, how might we provide an end-to-end experience to our customers? What happens when a person is receiving a parcel? What happens when they're sending a parcel? Those bold questions form the basis for us to start transforming our ways of working. So we started from scratch with our CX philosophy, and we defined 4 pillars that we follow when we build for our users. Grow, so we do not just look what customers need now, but also care about what they will need to succeed in the future. Delight, small and big acts that make difference, and something that just makes the users happy. Like, how can we turn disappointments into constructive discussions? Reduce, we don't just optimize things, but provide reliable services that make sense. And we listen, we don't just anticipate what's coming, but find ways for our customers to signal relevant needs for us. Those are not design principles, but rather a framework for our company and what great means. And as it goes with every major transformation, it is led by people like you and me. And I'm quoting our head of design here, Yuho, states, "I want our teams to focus on impact. This is not just about digital touchpoints. It is about end-to-end experiences." In order to do that, we structure our teams to function around customer journeys, as well as keeping some cross-functional teams that enable everyone to build collaboratively. For us, to measure journeys for our designers and their teams are receiving a parcel and sending a parcel. Therefore, we are working to create world-class customer experience across the whole end-to-end experience. As you have pointed out, though, it is not just about digital touchpoints. We are not focusing on just creating an app. Another bold question that we asked ourselves was, how might we enable customers to return any parcel using any parcel locker around the country? Such bold questions, though, bounce eternally around the office walls unless you have everyone on board. Design and change is not possible if you do not have the organizational buy-in from your VPs and CEOs. However, even when you do, that does not mean that you get to relax and do not have to work hard to prove the value of design. At Posti Design, we measure our success through customer metrics, and we couple that with KPIs that are specific to our profession and ways of working. So we have to measure what matters. Quoting Kim Goodwin here, who says, "Until we measure what we value, we will continue to overvalue what we measure." For us, CSAT is what matters, which is a short for customer satisfaction. It is a KPI used to measure how satisfied the customer currently is with their experience, from 1, very unsatisfied, to 5, very satisfied. This is obviously coupled with open-ended feedback as well and research. But this is a key metric that is very invaluable to Posti Design as well. I can give you an example. Our receiving team tracks CSAT not only when a person is tracking a parcel through the website, but also when they are receiving it, like when they go to actually get it. And then what we do is that we collate the average of different journeys into what we call customer experience index, and we use it for the core of our performance-based conversation for both the teams, but also the leadership. So how do you help an organization understand the value of design? Obviously, there are numerous ways that you could do that, and there isn't really a one answer that fits all organizations. One way to align is to put your KPIs, align your KPIs with your organizational goals. For example, customer satisfaction. It is important for design and our teams in general to work on end-to-end journeys to create a holistic experience if we want to measure customer satisfaction. We also have other metrics like numbers of downloads and user retention for our flagship app, Oma Posti. And it is then in those teams' best interest to figure out how to reduce churn as much as possible and increase customer satisfaction. But I can give you also a more concrete example that enables work for teams and makes them effective. And this is, of course, the introduction of a design system. With design systems, you can pretty simply measure how much time, which then translates to how much money you can save your company, without even making a case for the actual benefits of cohesion, a unified experience, a harmonious brand. You can measure how much time it takes for your designers. If you can measure how much time it takes for your designers to design something without having a design system versus if you do have a design system, then the results are usually astounding. And that leads us to Posti Design System. The design system team at Posti is what we call building blocks. We are working with the rest of the teams to codify and bring clarity and cohesion to a customer experience. And we are working on a federated contribution model. What that means is that everyone is a contributor to the design system, while the team is there to manage, maintain, and support the scaling of the system, which spans across 14 different teams. In order to operationalize how we design, our design system has to be intentional about the user experience that we bring with our products. It is a shared language that supports the ways that our people create. It is also collaborative so that they can create together. But of course, it is also a system, so we have to take into account Conway's law. I really hope you were paying attention before. At the design system level, we also are able to track KPIs that are specific to the system's purpose. So measurements like adoption of components, contributions to the library, expanding the component base are key for us. By having metrics inside Figma, we can really see how many projects are using which components from the library. This really helps us to identify components that might be obsolete or they might be simply hard to understand or use. And we also strive to be AA compliant with our services, so accessibility is always an ongoing discussion. So this is our stack. Figma, obviously, being the heavy-duty design power tool that we all love and cherish. We use Storybook for our React components. We use Zero Height for our documentation in regards to the design system, the brand, and the tone of voice. We use Miro for collaborative work and workshops. We use Slack for asynchronous communications, and unfortunately, we use Teams for meetings. And as I mentioned earlier, we are having a contribution model which is federated. And the way that it goes, like pretty simply, is that we have a Figma file which we call design system proposals, and then it houses all the proposals that the designers make. Usually, after a proposal is made, the designer will add a comment into that proposal, which comment then goes into our Slack, that we start having conversations there around this topic. Proposing a component, however, can be done also by anyone else in the company, but there is a process for that. And the next slide is going to show you a graphic that might take a while for you to read, so please don't read that, but I'll go through. If a component already exists and fulfills the team's requirements, obviously they can just use the design system. If no component does that, we ask them if an existing component could be modified in order to fulfill their requirements while meeting existing requirements of other teams. If the answer is yes, then they can propose a light contribution to the design system. If not, then we ask them to create a prototype that best fits their needs. If this is something then that can be used by other teams, then they can make a contribution of a new component to the design system. If not, they can just hard code it into their own product or part of the project. However, all components have to be designed by designers and have to be reviewed with designers before implemented. Documentation is also important, as we are very interested into keeping a database of components and their purpose, but also technical documentation for the React component. A design system should not be a place, though, that you just dump your ideas and you componentize them. It takes careful planning and treating it as a product and an experience from all different points of view. A detailed example of how this is done is that we are striving at Posti to bring clarity how our component categories are structured and even to what they mean when we say things like design tokens. For non-designers, for technical people who might be new to this, it serves as an artifact that informs you of what you're currently seeing. What is this? The same thinking applies for each Figma component then, that they all span into 5 categories, which is tokens, basic components, composite components, page sections, and page templates. So we recently upgraded the organizational license of Figma to take advantage of its enterprise and measuring features. What the update allows us fundamentally is to restructure our projects and how we organize our work. Admittedly, we take huge inspiration from the community, and a fine example is the recent Spotify ways of working shared some time ago. Their work is stellar, but we also have to be mindful of the fact that this is not a one-size-fits-all. Likely what works for Spotify will not work for Posti. For us, it is a learning material that we try to understand as much as possible and a huge inspiration. Future plans for our design system is that every team at Posti sets their own team space in Figma so that they can have multiple projects. It also makes sense for us to compartmentalize our design system to mobile and desktop at least, so that we can manage the scaling better. However, we are early into having the capacity to release any helpful plugins or something similar, so we hope to contribute in the other different ways. And we always look to take it a step further ahead. What that means is that for our design system, it's not like it just serves designers to do their work better, but also the rest of the organization to bring everyone closer together. We have in Figma our concept template kit, which is a set of canvases and exercises that support strategic design thinking and open up the collaboration capacities for everyone in the organization. So we have things like customer journey canvases and all kinds of different canvases that the people can use as teams and collaborate better together. So how does the design system scale? Well, I see it pretty simply and we don't have to really think about it like in a very complex ways. So your design system scales as long as we have a version of that design system that feels better than the previous one. And I would like to wrap up with some takeaways from this talk. So effective change is holistic, and design is change. We need to fundamentally change how our orgs operate and what they value. Design works best as an equal partner to business and technology, not as a function in a tech team, nor as a siloed practice. Embed design inside the organization's DNA from the bottoms up, but also from the top down. Measuring is part of the conversation between you and your customer. A design system is a product. It is tangible. It can convince your business to get on board. It is also measurable. And as an organization, you have to work really, really hard to disprove Conway's law. However, laws are universal and inevitable. So what can you do? Thank you very much for listening to me. Feel free to connect with me on Twitter, LinkedIn, and continue the conversation. Thank you.